welcome back to the Nature Repair and Climate Adaptation stream. Next up we've got Lou Rogers from the Richmond Landcare Inc. Presenting on nature-based solutions building flood resilience in the Lismore Catchment. I'll just load up your slides. No. There we go, I think. Yes. Lou, over to you. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, there's quite a nice turnout. I'm thinking my presentation could probably fit in a couple of the other themes as well, given we're a grassroots community organisation. But we are doing a lot of work in this space around using nature-based solutions for flood mitigation. So that's the title. I thought I'd just nature-based solutions is one of those things that there's a lot of definitions, and sometimes people are like, what do you even mean when you're saying nature-based solutions? And sorry, I thought I had the next slide up, which is this one. And so basically what nature-based solutions they are using ecosystem functions, using natural systems to solve problems that were created by people and by our societies. I've used this international definition, but there are a lot, they're pretty much the same. It's using, benefiting both biodiversity and people. So how can nature-based solutions mitigate human-induced problems? There's lots and lots of different things that nature-based solutions can do. Water filtration, flood buffering, improving soil health, which is really critical, protection of habitat, which is really critical, and enhancing climate resilience, which of course is also really critical. It's all very critical. There's a couple of examples, so I'm only going to be talking about our pilot and the nature-based solution that we use, but there are other ones, and these are two that I think are pretty happening in our region as well, looking at regenerative agriculture and also wetland reinstatement, creating more airspace on floodplains to hold water. I've got a statistic that if you improve soil organic content by 1% in over a hectare, you can actually increase the soil holding capacity up to 30,000 litres for each hectare that you increase by 1%. But I'm looking at reforestation. Now, this looks like a pretty intimidating document. You don't have to worry about all the xylem and the phloem, but basically what this picture's showing is that if you plant deep-rooted tree species in any sort of landscape, they're going to be transpiring and they're going to draw that water out of the soil, which in effect then creates more airspace within the soil for infiltration when we have heavy rainfall events. We also have root systems which hold soil together. This is a very established Landcare site. I'd like to say 20 years ago I was part of the Landcare group that planted these trees, and they are looking absolutely fantastic now. We had an incredibly massive flood that went through and topped all of these trees. Not only did they all survive, but they thrived. This image here is a site, the one that's looking very poor and denuded there. It's a site actually on a property that we are working on. That area has been eroding during every high flow event since we had our catastrophic flood. So in 2022, a lot of our upper tributary creeks, their geomorphology just changed completely. There's a fence, you can't really see it in this picture, but there's a fence that's hanging in there. So this landholder has been losing quite a lot of soil every time a big flow throws down. The one on the bottom, that's a bit of creek that's just upstream, or actually it's on a separate creek, but it's just upstream. And you can see that there is erosion happening in this particular spot, but look at all of that moss and all of those rocks. They're actually held there. Those root systems are holding that bank together. And so when you have erosion, it's not really as dramatic as the other one that we're seeing just there. And then also forests on low gradient floodplains actually create this barrier. They create a barrier if the water is surface runoff coming from the hills, but they also create a barrier for overbank flows from the creek. This is actually in a national park, but a massive event went through this forest in 2022, and you can just see all of that debris that's being held up there. That creates that barrier that actually holds water up and slows that flow. Also has the benefit of catching debris and sediment and preventing erosion. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see, because have I got a mouse? No. There's this little tree that we planted there. It's doing its job already. Look at the way it's holding up that grass. So across this whole planting, I got super excited. I was like, what if we did a little quick analysis of how much grass was prevented from going into the creek? This is during Cyclone Alfred. This little tree survived that. They're all doing really, really well now. They're almost as tall as me. I know that's not much of a feat, but still very impressed because we planted them in December last year. So a little bit of the boring stuff. So our project, Nature-Based Solutions, Building Flood Resilience in the Lismore Catchment, it's funded through the National Emergency Management Agency. It's administered through Reconstruction Authority. I think everyone in the room might appreciate the challenges that I have working with not one but two bureaucracies to get anything approved, but still. But I think the exciting thing about this project is it was actually designed at a grassroots level over years and working. I've got some of my esteemed Landcare group members in the crowd now. We have a fantastic group of people with decades of knowledge, and this project was designed kind of at that grassroots level, but we also worked with the regional agencies and the universities. The project is aiming to, it's a pilot. So we're looking at 25 hectares in 2 subcatchment creeks, which I'll show you in a minute. We're demonstrating what the role of nature-based solutions, or in particular reforestation or revegetation of these upper catchment creeks. We're quantifying that through the use of hydrodynamic models. We want to demonstrate these scientific facts, but we're also wanting to work with landowners and agricultural member-based organisations to incentivise future uptake. So we're looking at markets to do that, and I was really very interested in your presentation. It was fantastic, very exciting and inspiring what we can do in this space. I'll be talking about it in a bit more detail, but the end product of our project, our pilot, which is at the end of next year, is to develop up a prospectus that actually identifies where across our landscape. So we're wanting to deliver this type of nature-based solution across our landscape so that we can actually have a tangible impact on flood flows as they leave these upper catchments and reduce that flood risk for downstream. Now, this is just a little bit of how we're putting all of this together. So in the centre there, we've got our primary project team. We have a community advisory group, which I'll touch on in a bit, that actually has provided us with amazing knowledge and recommendations in terms of how we've designed the planting design for the project. We're working with traditional owners through a forum with multiple Aboriginal organisations in our region called Walking Together. That's at its very early stages, but it's a very exciting place. We are also working with scientists. So we're actually in collaboration with Southern Cross University, who we engaged to do a lot of our work. We're working with Australian National University, we're working with Macquarie University, and we're working with Griffith University, all in this space of how we can use nature-based solutions for flood mitigation in the Richmond River catchment. And then we've got a committee, and we've got a project control group and all of those other governance structures. So this slide is actually to demonstrate how we actually chose where we would actually undertake the pilot. As I said, it's small scale, 25 hectares. We're trying really hard. I've got my lovely project officer in the crowd today. She's fantastic. She gets out. People are excited. They want to be part of the project. And so maybe we may get more than 25, but ultimately that's our goal. And we're using this approach where we're looking at 2 single subcatchment creeks, and we're actually identifying target areas in there. So we're not running a similar project to a lot of river rehabilitation projects. They put out an expression of interest, you get people interested, but then you've just got these little fire spots around the catchment and not really having it all together and aggregating. We used CIRO's LiDAR, CIRO's LiDAR that they generated in 2022. So what we're looking at is we're looking at areas within these upper catchments. So this is the place that most of the rain falls. We've got deep incised creeks, and then they come out to these little flats where the gradient drops out, and they're little floodplains. But we've also, where we're strategically placing them, so if you can see, there's that big line across there that shows, that's a very flat patch there with the contours spread out far away. And then at the bottom, there's a little red line that shows, we're calling them a pinch point. And basically that's an area where naturally the water is going to start to pool behind it. And what we're trying to do is actually create this airspace and this barrier upstream of that, so we actually hold more water than would naturally happen, or unnaturally actually, given the amount of land clearing in that area. We have done that exercise across, so this is Terania Creek on the east and Tunnable Creek on the west, and all of those green polygons are they're areas that we would like to target. We would like to actually get most of those landholders on board to be part of our project. That's about 75 hectares, so it's not going to happen under this project, but we are actually capturing a lot of neighbours. And the reasons it's so important to capture those neighbours is that what we can do in this is we can model the aggregated impact. So we're not looking at the little patches around the landscape. We're actually going out, targeting landholders. So and the uptake has just been incredible. We've got landowners that have been wanting to look after their creek frontage for a very long time, but it's really expensive to rehabilitate riparian zones. So we've come with money, tapped them on the shoulder. They've said, yes, please, we'd love to be involved. And this is just showing, like, this is a couple of sites, and it's just showing that, as I said before, we are looking to capture flow not just from overbank flows, but also from that surface runoff. We're really targeting gullies wherever we can, and then that has that other secondary benefit of reducing erosion into the streams when we have those big high rainfall events. As I mentioned before, we're working with First Nations people, rights holders, not stakeholders. It's really important that we acknowledge that First Nations people need to be at the table at the beginning of any sort of project design. So we're developing up a prospectus around all of this work, and we need to make sure that it is not just culturally informed, but has the potential to be culturally led. We're working with multiple Aboriginal organisations in our area. We've got funding for engagement, but also, more importantly, we're putting money aside for research, for First Nations people to do research and how nature-based solutions or what can be used for flood mitigation in our area. And we need to make sure that we do this in a way that our prospectus is culturally informed and, as I said, also culturally led. Our community advisory group that I mentioned before, so I've got a couple of esteemed members in the crowd today, but they have just been absolutely integral to how we've developed our planting design. We discussed our planting density. Now, this is actually creating a little bit of complexity. We're looking at having these very close plants, so not just trees, but also sedges, so lomandra, very close together. And this actually creates quite an impost on the landowners, where historically we would be saying, now it's up to you to maintain your patch. But because we've got these trees so close together, and there's a real risk of running them over if you use traditional methods of using a ride-on lawnmower, we need to get out there, and so we're actually also making sure that we can put some of our funding into supporting landowners, particularly over the next couple of years as we reach canopy cover, to get their to help them with maintaining their block. Not to say that they're not, actually. Most of them are very active. We're getting some fantastic co-contributions, but we do want to make sure that we're ensuring we're able to help these trees not just survive, but also thrive. We're also planting out if any trees died, so we just had a bit of a frosty winter. Some of the trees didn't make it through. We're going back out and we're planting those trees, those spaces with trees, so that the objective of slowing the flow isn't compromised by having big spaces because of dead trees. The other really exciting bit with the community advisory group was we came up with what are the plants that we're going to plant. We're calling them the flood champions. So they're the trees that can handle they're very flood tolerant. They can handle having their feet wet for a significant amount of time. Depending on the size of them, they can handle being overtopped for a certain amount of time as big floods run through. And we're choosing deep-rooted tree species, but also very tall tree species. So then we do have those moderate floods. And when we're out I forgot to mention this, but when we're out in the paddock talking to the landowners about how much land they're willing to give us to undertake this work, we're also getting them to eyeball where's the minor flood got to, where's the moderate flood got to, where's the major flood got to, and where we can, we're targeting those moderate flood levels. But big tall trees will continue to create barriers as the flood waters rise, and these 31 species are part of that. And then also not planting in rows, and that's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. We're also really excitingly using citizen science as part of the project. We've in the Richmond River, so we've got the Richmond River Keeper, and there's a program that they run to develop up condition scorecards twice a year. So we're also using that methodology so that in our target areas we're actually being able to be compared to other programs across the region. I don't know where it fell off here, but was that a ding for me to stop? No. Good. The other thing is that we have data that has been collected, rainfall data that's been, so basically the Bureau of Meteorology has that map that I showed you with all of the polygons on it. The bottom of that map is a little village called the Channon, and that's where the Bureau of Meteorology measures rainfall over time for that area. Now, the rain gradient between there and the upper catchment is actually a couple of 100 millimetres at times than it is at the Channon. And so there's this fantastic community organised group called the Sentinel program, and they actually every time there's a high, particularly if there's a flood watch, but even if it's a high flood high rainfall event, they get out there and they're looking at their gauges and they're measuring over time. So in this hour we had this much rain, in this hour we had this much rain, and then they also go down to their creek frontage where they've got surveyed in reflectors, and then they could get a bit of a okay, well, it was this much rain and the creek rose by this much, and in those upper creeks the levels tend to fluctuate quite a lot, and so we're collecting all of that data and we're using that data to actually calibrate our hydrodynamic model, which I think is a really exciting and powerful bit of citizen science. The other part of the project, which I think is absolutely genius, I didn't write the project, so I'm allowed to say that, the proposal I mean, is that we are looking at how do we get the uptake that we need to have a practical and proper impact on the flow that leaves the upper catchments and heads down to the floodplains. Now, we had a very catastrophic flood in February 2022, and the level of that flood was actually 2 metres above anything that had ever been recorded. And Lismore does floods. Like, most of the houses in the floodplains are on stilts. It used to be kind of fun when you got flooded in and you couldn't get out of your patch, and you made sure you had enough tinned food to get through. This one was absolutely unprecedented, and I would just say from the outset that nature-based solutions, and any other solution for that matter, is not going to actually stop a flood that's like that. The land was so saturated, and then a metre of rain fell in that upper catchment, and we're talking 5 tributary streams that had that much water, and it was 500 gigalitres in one day went through Lismore, which is the downstream town. But the reason I'm saying all of that is we know that we can have some impact in those high events, and not instead of other options, but as well as other options. But we need to do this at a landscape scale. It's absolutely crucial. Our 25 hectares isn't going to make a difference. Well, I just take that back. We did model a run of our 25 hectares, and there is like a 1% or 0.5% of a decrease in the flow in a 1 in 100 year event. So that's exciting, our little tiny patch. If we put that out at a landscape scale and we work out exactly how many hectares we need to have under reforestation in that upper catchment, we need to make sure that we've got the funding to do that. And government funding is not going to be enough. So we actually, if I'll use this, in terms of the desire to take up this type of work, Richmond Landcare is under the North Coast Regional Landcare Network. They have a project as well. It's looking across 4 different catchments. They put out an expression of interest for projects, which they have $2 million to fund, and they were $14 million oversubscribed. $16 million worth of projects came in for them to assess and break down to that $2 million. We need other options, and so we are working with Southern Cross University and some other collaborators the Eco Markets Australia, and also the people who've developed up the biodiversity credit for the cassowary credit, which has just recently been released, and apparently Eco Markets now is actually also developing up a water quality credit, and it would be amazing if we could actually also tap into that. But landowners need need an economic return. We need to make this actually feasible for this uptake. We can't take land from them for their livelihoods and then expect that that's going to be okay. The desire to look after their creek frontage, plus the ability to kind of get further out into that floodplain so we can reach those higher flood peak levels, is really important. Oh, great, because my next slide is... Anyway, this is a really exciting space. Southern Cross University are working with us to do a riparian carbon credit. So they actually developed up full cam, which is a blue carbon credit. So they've got expertise in there. And then the other expertise is around biodiversity credits. We've also started talking with First Nations people around using a term called biocultural credits. That's obviously not up for us to lead. There's some Aboriginal organisations that are in that space that are pushing for that, and I think that we want to collaborate with them. But yeah, primary focus for us is carbon and biodiversity. And that's me. Any questions?
We've got about 5 minutes for questions, so if anyone's got any, yeah.
Question coming from a New South Wales government officer, so it's going to highlight our siloed nature, unfortunately, but have the RA staff that you guys are funded through shown much interest in feeding this back up the chain to NEMA around what the options are? They're just conscious after being to one of their consultations they ran
CSIRO.
There seemed to be like a real lack of nature-based solutions put in the mix.
Yes.
So keen to know and how we could potentially support.
I don't think we're going RA path. We're trying to just get to NEMA. We actually ran a little bit of a campaign. So CSIRO, for anyone who's not from the Richmond area or whatever, so after the 2022 floods, the CSIRO and National Emergency Management Agency have a whole bunch of funding to actually help Richmond River Catchment work out how to deal with catastrophic floods. Then they ran a community consultation process. It's actually happening right now. I'm missing out on the second one, but they ran a community consultation process. They had 15 conversation starters, which were all engineering solutions. There was no nature-based solutions in there. So we actually ran a bit of a campaign. It wasn't just us. There was a lot of people making noise around why aren't nature-based solutions included in this. My conversation with CSIRO at that point was, probably like my first slide, like there's so many definitions of what nature-based solutions are. If everyone put nature-based solutions on the thing, but there wasn't a sort of like, and then where, CSIRO weren't going to be able to entertain the idea. I don't think they actually have entertained the idea, but one of the amazing things that happened is that our little campaign and the momentum that got, we gave people some words to write. We had 255 characters, I think, if you wanted something other than an engineering solution. So we gave them some word, which was basically like reforestation of upper catchments as a nature-based solutions using Richmond Landcare data. And a whole lot of people came back at us and said, thank you for sending that out. Like, I knew what to write and I was able to ask for something more specific. And then this is a classic bureaucracy. So Australian National University are reporting to one area of NEMA, and the CSIRO stuff is another area of NEMA, and the woman who works with Australian National University was in the tea room when two people from the CSIRO team was talking about how many community people asked for nature-based solutions. So we organically found out that NEMA's listened to what we're saying.
Well played.
Have one more if anyone's... Is there one here? Yep.
This is coming from a different perspective altogether. You work with multiple organizations. Just wanting to know how you kind of navigated so many things, including now you're thinking of going into the space of crediting the carbon and going. There is a lot of red tape around all of this. Just wondering your experience and like what was a major challenge that you are still facing or trying to find out as well the answer of that?
You mean working with bureaucracy?
Yeah, that part.
Or the university. So working with the universities is exciting. Like, they actually, and it is just blow my horn a little bit there. I mean, my kind of cut my teeth actually working for a catchment management authority in Victoria and for the department at the time, Sustainability and Environment, where it's very much a partnership sort of thing. So I've got collaboration in my blood. And I arrived to do this project, and I just reached out to the unis, and they're all talking about the same stuff, and they're all prioritising the Richmond catchment. I was like, and they're all developing models, and I was like, we've got to actually have a little bit of a chat, guys. So I've organised a meeting for last year. We had a technical kind of workshop where everyone got to say what they were doing, and then it was amazing. All of these like, oh, I'll catch up with you offline so we can talk about, I'm really excited about your work. And so yeah, that collaboration is actually now, we've agreed that this is what we're doing, and it's super exciting. It's so inspiring. I really feel like, particularly the modelling of nature-based solutions, not so much the credit stuff. That's next year's job. This year is about definitely getting that model sorted out. But yeah, it's great, and there's such an amazing wealth of knowledge that's getting brought into the project through being able to have those collaborations, and also the link with that like academic and research with our community advisory group as well. It's like pivotal to our project's success.
Thank you.
Yes, Don.
Sorry, if you've got any questions, we don't have time anymore, but you might want to catch up outside.
Really quick, and I could have asked you another time. So I had heard on the pipeline that Ipswich has been doing nature-based solutions. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't. Let's find out. Thank you.